Welcome to Let's Connect Greater Portland, a show about the changes and challenges we face and the great things that people are doing to make Greater Portland a great place. I'm Christina Egan, your host. Today, we're diving deep into the workforce shortage in Maine, its impacts on workers and employers, and how housing affordability and childcare are important for our economy. If you have questions, we'd love you to join the conversation. Give us a call at 780-4909. Again, that's 780-4909. Today, we have three guests joining us, one who brings the statewide perspective, one who brings the regional, and one who brings the local. I'm really excited to have Tae Chong. He is the Maine State Chamber of Commerce's Director of Multicultural Markets and Strategies, a big mouthful of a title there. Right. And he has a wealth of experience in fostering business growth and addressing economic challenges in the entire state. Welcome, Tae.
Hi, Christina. Thank you for inviting me.
Great to have you. We also are joined by Quincy Hentzel, who is the Executive Director of the Portland Regional Chamber of Commerce. She also brings a wealth of experience. She works with many different member businesses in the area and knows at a very tactical level what they need. Welcome, Quincy.
Thanks for having me.
And Melissa, this is my first time meeting you. I'm so glad to have you. Melissa Hue, she is the Director of the Office of Economic Opportunity for the City of Portland, and she's helping people overcome barriers to employment and strengthening the city's economic resilience. Really great to meet you, Melissa.
I'm so glad to be here.
So glad to have you. All right, Tae, we're going to jump right in with you. And I'd love to hear a little bit about how you believe the workforce shortage has impacted businesses throughout the state. What are you seeing at the Maine State Chamber?
Well, it's no secret. Everyone knows that Maine is the oldest state in the country. Our median age is almost 50 now. In the United States, we also happen to be one of the whitest states in the country. And in the United States, the mode, which is the number that comes up the most, the mode age for white Americans is 58. And so if you're the whitest state in the nation, the mode number is going to be the oldest. You're going to see the number 58 come up quite a bit. The other thing that we have to look at is not just the demographic shift, but we have to look in terms of, pandemic and post-pandemic. And so everything shifted employment-wise after the pandemic. What happened was the Great Resign. But in Maine, our Great Resign wasn't from young people. It was near retirees. And this is all data from Amanda Rector, who's going to be speaking at the chamber pretty soon. But the other thing that we also have to look at is the behavior of Gen X and Gen Z. They now make up almost 55% in the next 6 years. By 2030. They'll make up almost 55% of the U.S. workforce. And how they see the workplace is different. And if you don't invite them and encourage them and to participate in our workforce, they're going to leave and they don't want to work here. And one of the things that they want is a more diverse workplace. And so if in the state of Maine, you've got rural businesses that aren't trying to reach out to Gen Zs and to millennials and make their place more welcoming, they're going to leave to other places like Portland. And if you feel like you don't have a place in Portland, you're going to go to other places that are more diverse like Boston or other places like that. So those are two things we have to kind of combat. We have to look at people who are retiring or near retiring, and as well as young people trying to figure out how to keep them here.
So we've got a real structural workforce shortage. It's not just right now, and actually the trends are not all that promising unless we come up with some strategies to try to figure out how to make places more attractive for younger people. Quincy, what are you seeing here in this region in terms of how businesses are being affected by not having enough workers?
Oh, we could talk about that for hours and hours, but it's been, I think I will ditto what Tae said, and there's been a lot of changes that have come post-pandemic. I think all employees look at their jobs differently now, and they want different things out of their jobs. And then you have the younger generation who really just looks at jobs entirely differently than older generations have. I say every industry sector is really facing this worker shortage. It's really being impacted in the hospitality industry.
So restaurants, hotels, tourism.
Yeah, and it's a little complicated why that's happening. We're going to talk about some of the really acute challenges those industries are facing, but even post-pandemic, just things really hit hospitality really, really hard in the pandemic, and it drove people out of those types of jobs. And I think that industry sector has really struggled in attracting employees back. And in a city like Portland, Greater Portland, that's really high tourism, high hospitality industry, it has just had an acute impact on our businesses in Portland.
And I'll just say I've had a variety of different shows with some of the municipal leaders in this region, and they face it too, right? So it's across like private sector, nonprofit sector, public sector, just all not enough people to fill the jobs that are there. Tae, you talked a little bit about the need for employers to create a place where Gen Z really wants to come, Gen Z and millennials, which means that we need to be very open to diversity and really welcoming it. I'm wondering if you could talk about what the role of immigrants in particular might be in filling this workforce shortage or playing a role in filling it.
It's absolutely critical. Without immigrants in the United States, literally, the United States would have no population growth. Without immigrants in Maine, we would have had no population growth for the past 20 years. And I'm doing a study for Asian Americans. Asian Americans were responsible for 25% of U.S. patents the last 10 years.
Wow.
So
starting a lot of companies,
right?
New products.
So all the AI advancements, medical, computer, Google, Microsoft is run by Asian Americans. You would have had, and they're all immigrants, you would have had no technological growth in the United States for the past 10 years. And immigrants going forward is going to basically make up the bulk of the U.S. workforce because, like I said, the white American mode number is 58. The mode number for Hispanic is 18. So the future workforce of America is going to be black and brown. The future consumers are going to be black and brown. And if the U.S. business and Maine business doesn't shift and put their focus on multicultural populations as a way to have them as employees or as customers, they're going to lose out on half of the U.S. economy. And in Maine, it's critical because now the multicultural population has quadrupled since 2000.
Wow. We're going to go a little bit into barriers, Melissa, about why some folks are not yet in the workforce. But there's one that we were talking about before the show started. Tae is actually the native here at the table. The rest of us are all from away.
I was born in Korea, but
You're born in Korea, but you've been in Portland
I'm a townie. I'm not a.
You're a townie. So we were just talking about that phrase "from away," which I had never heard before I chose Maine and moved here. And I'm just wondering whether any of you have reactions to the use of that phrase and what that means for the workforce shortage.
I was actually in a meeting yesterday where this very thing came up, and it's come up a lot recently. I moved here 18 years ago, and everyone would say I was from away, and that never really had a very welcoming feeling around it. And I think now, in particular, if you say, oh, you're from away, it just makes you not feel included.
Yeah.
And makes you feel like an outsider. So we, the business community, the chamber, have really been very intentional to not say from away. I think it's fantastic that we have all chosen to live in Portland, and that should be celebrated, and you shouldn't be felt to feel like you were an outsider who came in. You are here now, and you belong here now.
Melissa, let's go to some other barriers also. There are people that there's lots of jobs out there, but there's still some people that don't have jobs, or they're underemployed, or they don't have good jobs. What do you think are some of the barriers for those people getting into the workforce?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the demographic. So if it's our immigrants, it's usually immigration status. That's a primary barrier for them. If it's Gen Z or youth, it's work-life balance, it's social inclusion, it's having a job that gives them a pipeline to success and being extremely transparent and visible about that pipeline to success. That doesn't only apply for youth, it also applies for adults as well. It's what they're looking to see, especially post-pandemic. People were in fear. Life was deemed too short. So after pandemic, people are just like, let me do something meaningful and contribute to my family in that way. And I don't think our workforce has acknowledged that feeling and that need for people to have a familial aspect to their workplace. So it kind of turns people off. Definitely representation is an important factor. If you don't see people who look like you typically don't want to work there. And if you do want to work there, you're going to suffer conversations that are divisive, like being from away. And the question becomes, like, when is someone no longer from away? Is it after 18 years? Is it being a townie? Either way, there's like that stigma attached to it. So those are barriers. Very specific barriers would be language barriers. That's always a huge barrier for immigrants coming in. It's the only way for them to receive economic mobility. You have to invest in English language learning. And I think for youths and millennials, like I said, it's the ability to have that work-life balance, the ability to have the structure at work, and then being able to do things on your own at home. People are really looking for being able to work from home for at least 2 days a week and having a job that pays them a very fair wage, and that's hard to find these days.
That is Melissa Hue. She's the director of the Office of Economic Opportunity for the City of Portland. I'm also here with Quincy Hentzel of the Portland Area Chamber and also with Tae Chong from the Maine State Chamber. And we are doing a deep dive today on Let's Connect into the workforce shortage in Maine. If you would like to join the conversation and have a question for our guests, please call us at 780-4909. Again, 780-4909. Melissa, I want to pick up on something that you were just saying. You listed a variety of things that people that are seeking to get into the workforce want, or people that are already in the workforce are not getting. If you had some advice for employers, what do you think are the top things that employers should do to create that more welcoming and inclusive place?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of things, but it depends on, honestly, the sector. It's not like the ask is for employers to roll out the red carpet for folks, but it is to be acknowledging different perspectives that are entering your workforce, and being able to address that unapologetically is what people are looking for. People are looking that if they work in a sector where there is discrimination or harassment happening, or there's at-will fires, they're being heard and seen and valued just as much as, you know, the traditional Mainer that's working there too. And once you have employers who are willing to take that visibility forefront, then people are more inclined to work at those locations. I think especially when people are first entering the workforce, it's extremely important because there's a sense of trauma that comes in when you work for something that is completely culturally different than your own. The individual tends to feel incompetent after a while, tends to feel very unseen, and tends to want to work for employment that allows them to have at least a peace of mind. And those are very entry-level, isolated jobs. And then it creates a sense of depression and homelessness and hopelessness in the family. So I think it's really important for CEOs and higher level leaders to take note to that and be visible about wanting culture and diversity.
For me, I think and I agree with everything that Melissa just said, is I also would add that I think a problem we have in the state of Maine as well as the country is the underemployment of immigrants and refugees. So what happens is so many people are tracked into low-level, entry-level jobs that they don't see promotion, and they're not elevated, and they don't see advancement, and so they get stuck. And when they get stuck, they leave. Or they don't know how to enter into a higher level job because they don't have relationships with hiring managers or HR directors. They only go where the people who got the job before them went.
Yeah, people tend to navigate towards their own connections,
exactly.
And if they're not connected to folks that are making those decisions, it's harder.
And 85% of jobs in the U.S. and in Maine is not advertised, so it's word of mouth. 85%.
Wow. That's a lot.
So that's a lot. So if you have connections, you have an 85% better chance in getting a job. If you're not connected, you're competing with everyone else for that 15%. And if you have a language barrier, and if it's a place where it's far away from where you're comfortable, you're less likely to apply for those jobs.
Quincy, are you seeing some of your member businesses making some changes in order to create the kind of workplace that people really want to work?
Yes, definitely. They are trying. And I was going to say, on the heels of what Melissa had mentioned, I think the greater Portland businesses are doing a fair job attracting people of color to their organizations. Where we're really struggling is retaining those individuals. And I think Melissa did a really good job of explaining why that is. So I think there is a lot of work businesses need to do, a lot of things employers need to look at to make sure their workplaces are really welcoming for all. It's one thing to hire somebody into your organization, but if you're not changing the way that your organization is operating and you're not making that individual feel welcome, they're going to leave. And we all know, the key to success is really retaining your employees. You don't want that constant turnover, and employers really want to be diverse. I think Tae mentioned it. We all know that diverse organizations are the most successful organizations for a whole host of reasons. So employers really want to diversify. I think we're still on that journey of figuring out how to do it and how to do it right. And we're learning lessons. We're learning hard lessons. But I think collectively we're going to be able to do this, and we're going to make a difference and make Greater Portland really welcoming for everybody.
Melissa and Tae, you had both talked before the show a little bit about the difference between kind of a short-term job and something that's a longer-term career opportunity, and also about how do you get into those careers through internships. What are some of the strategies that you think are going to be most successful? Melissa, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I first want to talk about the difference between a short-term job and a long-term job. And I think the short-term job is a very old model. It's you get here and you work. And it doesn't matter where you're working, you're just working. So everybody just needs to work. And that's proven to be ineffective and I think a little bit fiscally irresponsible, especially for immigrants coming in, because they work entry-level jobs for up to 13 years. And that's not really great for the economy because they're working an average salary. We did a short little pilot in the city of Lewiston where I was given 63 immigrants coming in, and they split them up into sectors of where they worked in their previous country. The only barrier there was the language barrier, but that's what they did. And then we just took the average amount that they would be paid in an entry-level job and multiplied it by, the year and how much they would get. And it was around like 1.2 mil, right? And then we did the average for their sector and how much the economy would get. And they were shortchanged by 1.6 million that these people could have brought in revenue if somebody took a little bit of time to introduce education and the importance of pipelines to these individuals coming in. And I think when that happens, what you would see is if you took investment in about education and language learning for about 3 to 5 years, people will be extremely more self-sufficient and economic mobility would rise. But if you handicap them and limit them by giving them the ability to work, but isolating them in situations where they can't fend for themselves because they don't speak the language, they can't fend for their families because they can't speak the language, then they will remain on government assistance for an extra 10 years. Wow. And that is absolutely unnecessary.
I can see that, Tae, you're nodding your head. Our listeners can't see you nodding right now, but I can. So what do you want to add?
Well, I think, that just speaks to how people are underemployed and just not promoted and not seen as a viable part of our economic community. But for me, the other thing that I'm nodding my head is just the fact that for first generation, which includes a lot of immigrants and refugee, they don't have relationships with business owners. And because they don't, the likelihood of getting them a job at businesses is very low. And in fact, Maine Career Catalyst, which is part of Focus Maine, they have an internship program. They have about 400 kids throughout the state of Maine. 85% are kids from private school or out-of-state kids, and only 15% are from public school kids. So that's UMaine, USM, SMCC, and community colleges. And so if you are a first-generation kid in poverty living in Maine, the chances of you getting an internship and getting a job in Maine is pretty low. And once you do get an internship, and this is from USM, they have a 98% positive outcome and 78% full-time employment, and their median salary is $55,000.
It's really, really promising statistics for this strategy.
Right.
For folks that are listening, are there places to go to try to find some of these internships? I know we have a lot of young listeners.
There's 1,000 internships at USM, but only a couple hundred actually get filled.
Wow.
So there's a huge missed opportunity, right? And so the disconnect is that you've got C-suites that want to diversify their workforce, and they tell their hiring managers to go find the best candidate, and the hiring managers don't want to disappoint the C-suite. So what they do is they'll find that the best candidate who might be black from Harvard that lives in New York, or it might be an Asian American kid that goes to Bowdoin but lives in Virginia, but overlooks that Somali or Hispanic kid that's going to SMCC or USM. And if you hired that Somali or Hispanic kid from USM or SMCC, the likelihood of them staying in Maine is much greater than someone from away.
And we need
I just said
everybody
that word.
to stay.
Someone out of state, not
Gotcha.
Yeah.
away. So ingrained, horrible.
Quincy, I'm going to ask you a little bit about the folks that you serve, the businesses that you serve in this region. They're overall, struggling to find people. And we've talked a lot about what employers can do, but what are some of the macro issues that are challenging businesses as they're trying to find people to work for them?
So it's interesting from the chamber's perspective. I've been involved in our chamber for 15 plus years, and our top priority has always been workforce development. What's been interesting over the last, I'd say, 2 years is our priorities have shifted. I wouldn't say shifted, but we have realized new challenges to developing a workforce. And that is housing, the lack of housing, and lack of affordable childcare. And we hear this daily from our members, from restaurants and coffee shops, all the way up to the biggest companies we have in the region. Employees cannot find affordable housing. And this is an issue across the country. It's not just Maine. It's not just Greater Portland. I think it's like an acuter challenge in our area, especially when you want to attract young people to Portland who often want to live in Portland. They may not want to have a car, which is fantastic, but they can't find a place to live that's affordable within walking distance to their office. So I hear from employers literally every day who are losing talent because they can't find a place to live. They may actually extend an offer to somebody who accepts it, and then they back out because they can't find housing. And
That's
if you don't
happened to us at the Greater Portland Council of Governments. We've lost candidates like that. I think you can kind of look all across the state and find that. We've on this show, we've talked with municipalities about how municipalities can change some of their plans and zones in order to welcome more housing. We've talked with the state about different kinds of money that could be available for affordable housing and housing. But it's still not enough. It's not fast enough. I think everybody agrees we're really in this big housing shortage, which is related directly to our workforce shortage. Are employers starting to take this into their own hands?
Well, interesting you should ask that. You have seen employers across the state. Jackson Labs is a great example of, and they have really acute challenges with housing based on where they are, but they have built employee housing. We are just having conversations with some of our largest members. We had one last week with Avesta Housing to talk to employers about the specific challenge they're facing with housing and what they could potentially do to help. Because to your point, we are not seeing this challenge be addressed fast enough. We all are looking at it. Even if today we came up with a solution, it would take years to execute it because you're building housing. And I do think private employers are looking at this as it is their number one barrier to bringing on employees. So they're going to try to figure out how to fix it. So I don't have any great solutions or programs that are being launched yet, but these conversations have started because it is that big of an issue for employers.
It's almost going back to an old model where you had like the company store, the company, barracks, not great living conditions in many cases, but where an employer was actually really trying to find a way where they're doing the actual housing. I'm wondering, Tae and Melissa, are you seeing with the folks that you work with, the businesses you work with the individuals you work with, childcare and housing rising to this level of priority?
Oh, housing, absolutely. And there's no magic wand to solve the housing crisis. I think in my little world, it's about connecting people to housing resources. So it kind of takes the pressure off of businesses, speaking to small businesses and saying, okay, look, you want to pay a fair wage. If the person gets 250% of the federal poverty line, they qualify for this healthcare benefit that you don't have to pay for. So you have two needs met. So those conversations are happening. Childcare will always be an issue. do a lot of immigrants come in with pretty big families. And it's hard because some of the Maine housing isn't built for big families. So we're also acknowledging that there has to be a diversity in housing as well.
Absolutely. And in the United States, 51% of the population are kids of color, but they make up about a third of the U.S. population. So childcare is really a people of color issue in the United States, and that needs to be addressed if you want that population to be our future workforce and consumers. And that's, obviously true here. And I just wanted to finish up one thing about internships. So if you have students of color become internships, and every state is going to have the dysfunction that we have, where the C-suite and hiring managers aren't communicating. But if Maine did that better than anybody else, we could recruit more people to come to Maine as interns and stay here, or go to college here because they know that there's a better internship pipeline because of the business community willing to work with the institutions to hire first-generation kids. I think that's how you create a long-term play. The short-term play is, imagine if 1,000 first-generation kids got jobs. Instead of graduating and working extra hours that got them through college. It could be Hannaford's, or in immigrant refugee communities, it's as personal care attendants. Now they're making $55,000 working for IDEX or for Unum. They're going to tell all their friends to come to Maine because you can get an internship and get a job starting at $55,000. That's the long-term play. And, the other thing is that New England's population is also diversifying more rapidly. There's about 14 million people in New England. The white population decreased by 500,000 in the last 10 years. The people of color population went up by almost 1 million.
So Tae has laid out a nice vision for us about how internships can really play into the future of Maine. I'm going to ask each of you, I'm going to give you a magic wand, actually, Melissa, and ask you, if you could do one thing, what would you do to try to make it easier for people to get jobs? And then, Quincy, I'm going to ask you the same.
Yeah, pilot more programs and initiatives. I think people are scared to try these pilot programs, and they continue on doing the same. So with the City of Portland Office of Economic Opportunity, there's 2 programs that I think might be actually 3 programs after we speak tomorrow, that might be extremely impactful. And they're low risk, high reward type things. So one program is a fellowship style program that takes strong community leaders, engages them with a lot of education, a lot of resources, and a lot of networking opportunities, and then refining their skill sets, and then saying, you give back to your community, so you have to impact the lives of X amount of people, and then tracking to see the growth of impact doing that. And it's become extremely helpful, and these fellows are just amazing. They've created their own programs, they have their own nonprofits, and they still find the time to do this work. Another one is piloting an idea where you go inside of the shelters and you give them apprenticeship, internship, and English language abilities from the start while they're in the shelter. So then when they do receive immigration status, they know where to go.
I love ending this show on solutions. What's yours, Quincy?
I will be pithy. Figure out how to build more housing. We have jobs, but we cannot attract employees if they don't have a place to live.
Tae Chong, it's been so nice having you on the show.
Same here. Thank you.
And Melissa, great to meet you again.
You too.
And thanks, Quincy. This has been wonderful.
Great to be here.
And I also want to thank Anela, our sound engineer, and WMPG, who collaborates with the Greater Portland Council of Governments in producing this show. You can reach us on Instagram at Let's Connect Radio. Join us next week for another conversation about the great work that's happening in our communities. Until then, be kind to yourself and to each other. I'm Christina Egan. See you next time on Let's Connect Greater Portland.